Right now, beneath one of the busiest harbors on the planet, trains packed with people are racing along the bottom of the sea. Above their heads, not sky, but water, and the massive steel hulls of container ships gliding past. The passengers don't feel a thing. Most of them have no idea that just a few meters overhead, the ocean is pressing down with the weight of thousands of tons. This is an underwater train tunnel in Hong Kong, and the way they built it sounds completely insane. They didn't drill down through the seabed. Instead, they cast gigantic hollow concrete boxes on dry land, each one longer than a football field and heavier than an aircraft carrier, floated them out into the harbor like ships, and then deliberately sank them, one by one, onto the bottom of the sea. And then they used the crushing weight of the ocean itself to lock the whole thing watertight. Here's how they did it.
Now watch why they had to dig under the sea at all.
Hong Kong is one of the most densely packed cities on Earth, and it has a problem built right into its geography. It's split in two by water. On one side is the Kowloon Peninsula, connected to mainland China. On the other side, across a strip of sea called Victoria Harbour, is Hong Kong Island, the glittering downtown with its skyscrapers. And every single day, millions of people have to cross from one side to the other. Ferries are too slow for that many people. Going around isn't an option. It's open sea. So the only real answer is to connect the two halves directly, underneath the water. And Hong Kong had already done it before. This new tunnel would be the fourth rail crossing under the harbor.
The city had grown so much that the older lines were bursting at the seams. They needed one more link beneath the sea just to keep the trains moving.
But there's an enormous complication. Victoria Harbour is not some quiet, empty channel. It is one of the busiest shipping waterways in the entire world. Enormous cargo ships, ferries, and vessels of every kind move through it around the clock. That traffic is the lifeblood of Hong Kong's economy. You cannot shut it down. So the challenge is brutal. Build a brand new railway tunnel across the bottom of a harbor without ever draining it, and without stopping the endless river of ships sailing overhead. How do you build on the seabed when there's a non-stop parade of ships right above you? Here's the core engineering choice. There are two main ways to put a tunnel underwater. The first is to send a giant boring machine deep underground and grind a tunnel through the solid rock far beneath the seabed. That works, but it's slow, expensive, and it means digging much deeper than you'd like, with long ramps down and back up.
The second way is far bolder. Don't dig through the seabed at all. Instead, build the tunnel in pieces on land, float those pieces out, and lower them into a trench dug into the seabed, then join them together underwater.
This method is called an immersed tube tunnel, and for Victoria Harbour, that's exactly what they chose. Now the numbers. The underwater section runs about 1.7 kilometers across the harbor floor. It's made up of 11 gigantic concrete segments. Each segment is roughly 160 meters long. That's about the length of 1.5 football fields, cast as a single piece of concrete. And each one weighs more than 20,000 tons. 20,000 tons is like thousands of cars fused into one solid block. And 11 of these monsters had to be floated across the harbor and set down on the seabed in a perfectly straight line. On paper, madness. All they had to do was build it.
So let's start with the strangest part. How do you make a tunnel that you plan to sink? The secret is that you don't build it in the water.
You build it on land, in what's called a dry dock, a giant pit near the coast that can be sealed off and pumped dry. Down on the dry floor of that pit, engineers cast the enormous concrete boxes, complete with the internal spaces where the train tracks will eventually run. Working on dry land is far easier and far safer than working underwater. You can pour the concrete precisely, check it, and seal it perfectly. In effect, they build the pieces of the tunnel like parts of a colossal construction kit, all on shore. And the scale of that shoreline operation is staggering in itself. To cast concrete boxes, each the length of 1.5 football fields, you need a fabrication yard the size of a small industrial district. A specially built basin big enough to hold these giants, with the capacity to pour and cure tens of thousands of tons of concrete at a time. Massive steel molds shape each section. Cranes and gantries crawl over them. It's less like a construction site and more like a factory that manufactures pieces of tunnel.
And when a section is finished, tested, and sealed, the whole yard is flooded so it can float away, and work begins on the next one, an assembly line for the heaviest floating objects most people will ever see.
And here the requirements on that concrete are almost obsessive. Because once a section is on the seabed, you can't repair it. It will sit under the ocean for 100 years, and a single crack means a leak deep underwater. So the concrete is a special, dense, waterproof mix, poured with great care to avoid cracking as it cures. On a project this size, fresh concrete gives off heat as it hardens, and if it cools unevenly, it can crack. So it has to be managed and cooled carefully. Every section is tested for water tightness in the dry dock before it ever touches the sea. It's far cheaper to find a flaw on land than to discover it when 20,000 tons are already on the harbor floor. Now for a genuine physics trick. How do you make a 20,000-ton block of concrete float so you can tow it across the harbor? Concrete sinks, obviously. The answer is sealing and hollowness. Each section is hollow inside, and its ends are temporarily capped with watertight steel bulkheads, trapping air inside. Now that gigantic sealed concrete box displaces so much water that it floats. Exactly the same reason a steel ship stays on the surface instead of sinking.
So they flood the dry dock, letting the sea pour in, and the finished sections gently lift off the bottom and float. A piece of tunnel that weighs as much as a small neighborhood bobs quietly on the water, ready to be moved.
Next comes the towing, and it's a nerve-shredding operation. Tugboats slowly haul each floating section out of the dock and across the harbor to the exact spot where it needs to go down. Think about what that means. You're dragging a floating concrete monster the length of 1.5 football fields through one of the busiest waterways in the world, surrounded by ships, currents, and wind. One mistake, and this behemoth could drift into something. So every move is planned to the minute. Ship traffic is carefully managed to open a safe window, and a whole fleet of support vessels, barges, and winches escorts the section into position. Down below, divers work in the murky harbor water, guiding and checking the placement of a block thousands of times heavier than they are. Each of the 11 placements is its own high-stakes operation that can't simply be paused halfway. But before any section goes down, the seabed has to be prepared, and that's a huge job on its own. While the sections were being cast, special dredging ships dug a long trench into the harbor floor, a precise channel exactly where the tunnel would sit. And digging in a live harbor means doing it carefully, section by section, without blocking the shipping lanes. The soft mud at the bottom is no good as a foundation. It would let the heavy sections settle unevenly. So the bottom of the trench is lined with a carefully leveled bed of crushed stone, smoothed to an exact grade, a perfect cushion for the sections to rest on. If that bed is even slightly off, a 20,000-ton block will settle crooked, and the joints will leak. The foundation is prepared with the same obsession for precision as the tunnel itself.
We're on the barge, right above the trench. The winches are releasing the cables. Now engineers are flooding the ballast tanks. It's getting heavier. It's starting to sink.
That massive concrete block begins to sink, slowly, under complete control, held on cables from vessels above, descending centimeter by centimeter into the dark water. 20,000 tons of concrete glide down toward the seabed. And it can't just land anywhere. It has to be set down snugly against the previous section, aligned to within just a few centimeters. On the bottom, in murky water, essentially blind. To pull off that precision, they use guidance systems. The section's position is tracked from above, using tall masts sticking out of the water linked to satellites, while sensors at the joint show exactly how the new section is lining up with the one already in place. Engineers on the surface watch the instruments and correct the descent centimeter by centimeter. They're assembling a construction kit by feel, more than 15 meters underwater, trusting numbers and sensors instead of their eyes. And it's worth pausing on what under the sea really means here in terms of force. Water is deceptively heavy. Every meter you go down, the pressure climbs. At the depth this tunnel sits, the sea is pushing on those concrete walls with a relentless, enormous force. Every second, forever. There are no breaks, no calm days for the structure. The ocean never stops pressing. That's why every section is so massively overbuilt, why the concrete is so thick and dense, and why the seals matter so much. The tunnel isn't just holding back water. It's holding back a mountain of water that is permanently trying to crush it from every direction. And it has to win that fight for 100 years without anyone able to easily go down and fix it. And now the most beautiful piece of engineering in the whole project, how the sections seal together so the sea can't get in. Because the joint between two concrete blocks underwater is the first place you'd expect a leak. Here's the solution. On the end of each section is a big rubber gasket, a soft, thick seal running all the way around the rim. When the new section is pulled up against the previous one, that rubber presses lightly against it.
So to demonstrate the hydraulic pressure locking, then comes the clever part. They pump the water out of the narrow space trapped between the two sealed ends, the nozzle in that gap, and the entire weight of the ocean is pressing on the outside of the section.
That enormous water pressure shoves the two sections together with a force of thousands of tons, crushing the rubber gasket into a perfect, watertight seal. And here's the elegant part. The deeper the tunnel and the harder the sea pushes down, the tighter that joint squeezes. The ocean, which is trying to force its way in, becomes the very thing that seals it out. The engineers turn the enemy into the lock on the door. But sinking the sections is only part of the story, because a tunnel on the seabed faces enemies you might not expect. The seabed is alive. Soft ground can slowly settle over time, and it can settle unevenly, with one spot sinking more than the next. On top of that, Hong Kong is a region that gets battered by typhoons, and it's not immune to the occasional earthquake tremor. A single rigid concrete tube, almost 2 kilometers long, if it were perfectly stiff, would crack under that kind of uneven movement. So the tunnel is deliberately not made perfectly rigid. The joints between the sections are designed to stay slightly flexible. Those same rubber seals also work as shock absorbers. The tunnel can flex and shift a tiny bit at its joints, adjusting to the moving seabed, without ever losing its watertight seal. It doesn't fight the ground rigidly, it bends with it and stays whole. And there's one final heart-stopping step, the last section. The sections are lowered from the two ends, moving toward each other, and eventually there's just one gap left to close between the blocks already resting on the seabed. You can't simply push a whole giant section into that last gap. There's nowhere left to move it. So the final connection is done as a delicate, specialized closure joint, carefully sealing the remaining space underwater. If anything goes wrong there and water finds a path in, the entire tunnel is at risk. That's exactly why engineers treat the closing of the last joint as a major milestone. From that moment, 11 separate concrete boxes officially become a single, continuous, dry road under the sea. Once all the sections are joined and the joint is watertight, the temporary steel bulkheads inside are removed, and the 11 boxes become one long, open tunnel you can walk through from end to end, on dry footing beneath the harbor. Then the whole thing is buried under a protective layer of rock and soil to shield it from ship anchors and anything that might sink and strike it. The sea above becomes just the sea again, and hidden beneath it lies a secret road.
And it's worth saying, Hong Kong is genuinely a world champion at this. Several crossings already run beneath Victoria Harbour, and most were built with this same immersed tube method. The city is quite literally stitched together underwater by concrete tunnels.
So step back and think about what this actually does. This tunnel became part of a new railway line that connects districts across the city and relieves the older harbor crossings that were choking on passengers. Huge crowds now pour through this underwater stretch every day, cutting straight across the city in minutes. People read, doze, scroll on their phones, and almost none of them think about the fact that, at that very moment, container ships are passing overhead, and tons of seawater are being held back by a concrete box that engineers floated out and sank right here. Here's the bottom line. To connect the two halves of Hong Kong beneath the sea, engineers refused to fight the harbor head-on. They didn't drain the ocean, and they didn't stop the ships. Instead, they built the tunnel in pieces on land, turned solid concrete blocks into floating ships, sailed them into place, and gently sank them onto a bed of stone, and then let the crushing pressure of the ocean itself lock the joints tight forever. They didn't overpower the sea. They outthought it and even tricked it into sealing the very tunnel meant to keep it out. Section by section, millimeter by millimeter. But hiding a road beneath the sea is just one way humans defy the water. What about a road that dives underwater in the middle of the open ocean and rises again on the far side? Or a bridge across a canyon so deep they call it the crack in the earth.
If you love watching humans take on the impossible and win, subscribe. This is the kind of story we break down here. See you at the next impossible structure.